Hey guys, so welcome back to another Let's Draw and Talk. And today I had a specific topic I wanted to talk about. Nothing too crazy, just something a little lighthearted. And I guess I'm just going to be experimenting with brushes and that kind of stuff. Not really doing anything specific. I'm going to make a shape and then do stuff with it. But yeah, I just finished watching the Netflix series uh, Marianne, um, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. This is going to be kind of a nice little review. Um, but yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly, and if you haven't seen it, I'm going to let you know right now. Spoiler alerts. I'm going to talk about a few things in a few of the episodes uh, over the next 20 minutes. I'm just going to reflect on what I had seen because I like the story and I like the premise and the concepts. And for the most part, I enjoyed it. It was a nice viewing experience. It was a wonderful viewing experience that I had. And this looks like a dragonish thing. But and I see a lot of like movie reviews and stuff. So take it as it is. This is not going to be the most thorough movie review. It's just a little overlay. It's an overview, if that's a thing. I don't know if that's a thing of the movie, of the series. It's a YouTube series, or it's a oh god, it's a Netflix web series, and it's pretty good. The premise is, like I said, spoiler alerts, guys. The premise is pretty interesting. It has a main character who's a successful writer, and it kind of has some fairly, uh, it has some fairly familiar motifs in it, which I'm not surprised. Most movies have those repetitive archetypes, and that's fine, you know. That's why I enjoy storytelling. I mean, I like to see stories that navigate away from trends or speak to some issues that are important nowadays. But in this case, uh, yeah, I think it has that pretty similar trope where the main character is a writer and stuff she writes about doesn't necessarily come true, but she ends up creating things that haunt her, and they manifest. And it's pretty blatant that this series is supernatural in its uh, at its core. And you could play off of the whole psychological uh, thrill aspect where it's like, oh, maybe the creature doesn't exist and it's all in her mind, and um, that kind of thing. She makes it up. I mean, she does make it up actually because she's the writer. But it's not explanatory that way. I mean, it doesn't hold the viewer's hand and say, okay, yeah, um, this is psychological. It it kind of it kind of takes the supernatural notch, and it cranks it up a bit so that way you're not confused as to what it could be. It doesn't try to be something it's not, I think, which is good. I think the writers had a specific vision and they went for it and they achieved it. Having said that, I did write down a few notes. Pulls out book. But the main character, oh my god, I can't remember the main character's name. Um, the main character uh, is uh, pretty typical main characters. Got some angst, got some things to work through, and you can definitely see that the character's going to go through some kind of growth throughout the entirety of the series. But you wonder as it starts, like you wonder if the pace of the series is going to maintain itself being a horror themed series, because you've got plenty of scary series, television series out there, but not a lot of them are geared towards the factors of keeping the scares, keeping the anticipation of the scenes, and building up those scenes in respect to creating those scary moments. Like with American Horror Story, it's mostly narrative based. You know, you have of the uh, a bit of the scary elements where the audience is being led into different areas, and um, thematically or cinematically they're being guided towards scary things, and scary things are happening, and then that leads to a resolution through, I don't know, something like a one example is a jump scare. Coughed as I said that. That was unintentional. And jump scares, you know, they're not the most creative way to. Uh, I mean, nowadays there are far more um, better ways to execute resolving a scene that builds up tension and that kind of thing. Not very. I mean, there are many ways, but not very many people develop that notion in their movies. Um, but let's see, where was I saying about? I was talking about jump scares and that kind of stuff. So it maintains a nice element of anticipation. It builds up that not anxiety, but it builds up the nature of the scene whenever something uh, shocking is about to happen, in order to engage the viewer and get, you know, that visceral response, because that's what's important in scary movies and scary themed items, is getting that visceral reaction, and, you know, getting that blood, that adrenaline pumping. And I think I might have just, maybe I'm just in the right place at the right time, or I'm at a point in my life where, you know, this is affecting me in a nice visceral way. But I think it was very effective uh, for what it was. Let's see. Um, but yeah, it doesn't utilize too many jump scares, although there are a few, and it really does a nice job of building up a scene in order to give the viewer a nice little response or reaction to what's happening. So I really appreciated that. Uh, you know, because things like American Horror Story, or my favorite series, Penny Dreadful, like it has a bit of that, but you know, it doesn't focus on that aspect. It doesn't focus on the horror aspect of the storytelling. And this one doesn't necessarily focus on that, but it utilizes it a lot more in ways that other web series, televised cable shows have not. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that that part of the story. But you know, there are a few cinematic things that I think I really liked. There's one scene in particular that's not so uh, brilliant, but it's a nice little step outside of what we see normally. And you've got the camera coming up to the guy on these docks, and it's like bouncing side to side. It's like taking, you hear footsteps approaching, and then he turns around and he faces you, and he looks right at the camera, and then the camera cuts away, and you see his point of view, it's nothing. And then it cuts back to the camera looking straight at him. He turns around, and then it proceeds again. You hear more footsteps. He turns around, there's nothing there. So it's like this nice bouncing back and forth of you getting a view of what the character is seeing, but then you also getting a view of what the creature slash creeper slash stalker thing is seeing. And then the fact that when he turns around and he looks directly at you, even though the camera hasn't moved, I think that provides a nice little supernatural, fantastical, ethereal concept. It provides a nice little uh, thematic and cinematic moment um, with in which the the audience can gauge his reaction as he turns around to see nothing, and we are invisible, and the creature's invisible, and it's just like, man, this poor guy, he's got no chance. He's got no chance. And with that notion, you begin to see that uh, the you begin to see the horror in those moments, because he's helpless, completely helpless to what's about to happen. I don't like this drawing. Let's do something. Uh, let's do something else. I've never started with a soft round brush before, but it's interesting. Um, Maybe if I don't press that hard. Let's see if we can create something weird. Uh, what else? So there's that. There are a few moments in the series itself where um, I look, I examine it, and I'm just like, oh man, that's. I was kind of taken out of the series and out of that moment, whatever was happening, because of the music. And I like most of the musical choices, the soundtrack, and all the creepy things that uh, fit with the music. However, the way they utilized it, not sure I really appreciate that. I think it could have been executed a lot better. For instance, in episode 5, there's a point where the music just gets way too distracting over this very emotional scene. And I feel like this emotional scene adds a lot of context and it creates a beautiful moment. But the music was so distracting from what could have been a very powerful scene, it just took me outside of that. And that was a bit disappointing. It was like they emphasized the music over the acting and the writing and the cinematography, and all those wonderful pieces were set up, but on the hierarchy of information, it was just overshadowed by this abrasive, loud, um, this abrasive. It wasn't so loud, and the music wasn't. It wasn't that it was bad. It's just that it kind of didn't fit with what was going on. It felt more edgy and angsty as opposed to being emotionally tied to the scene. It didn't match, and that was kind of heartbreaking. Um, but it is what it is. And people decided, those guys decided what it is that they wanted to do, to view, to exhibit, to exhibit. I keep changing in my head what I want as a design. This is the hard part, guys. I think trying to draw and then just talk about things. I think I should probably. I have an idea of what I want to explore, but I'm only giving myself 20 minutes to draw stuff and to invent stuff, and that's becoming a whole nother task. But this is a nice exercise. So maybe somewhere along the road, I'll become accustomed to this format, possibly, um, and I'll get really good at doing something really quick. But for now, you'll have to bear with me because this is an odd learning experience for me. And trying to just talk about things and get some ideas out there and get people inspired to be creative in these terribly these terribly frustrating times. Um, and this is an interesting shape, very bizarre. Hmm. What can we do with that? Can we do anything with that? Oh, I think I might be seeing something, actually. I think I might be seeing something. Maybe. Oh, the shape gets more and more interesting. Huh, okay. We'll just keep exploring. We'll keep exploring. Keep exploring. So yeah, I think the series is really worth checking out. Big fan of uh, if you're a big fan of scary themed stuff, you might appreciate it. I mean, I did, and I love that kind of stuff. Uh, it's it's one of those wonderful formats that I feel connected to in some way. That's not only just like, oh, as a kid I actually watched scary movies, but it's just it provides a sort of outlet for storytelling that you don't get in drama or comedy or even action. I mean, I think they all provide different elements in drama. You know, it's always emotional, and people cry, and perhaps they laugh sometimes, but more like more like that little tick on the value scale. So the laughter swings more towards comedy, and of course, you get laughter and joy out of comedies, and lightheartedness, and drama. You get emotion and a sense of passion, desire, and then with horror, you get this you get all those dynamics. You can have all of those elements. You can, and then it goes into a nice little upbeat of like not only is it emotional, but it's about it becomes like I said visceral. Uh, that anticipation, the buildup of the scene. If you really watch it and put yourself into it, you feel your heart start to pound and your blood start to pump, and then it's just yeah, man, it's just like oh wow, that's something you don't get when you watch. Oh well, at least I don't get when I watch drama. Or granted, when I watch dramas, I don't know. I don't. I've seen plenty of dramas, and you know that's always it can always be heart rendering, but you can get that same heart rendering storytelling through scary movies where you can attach yourselves to the characters and see their painstaking emotional reactions and those reactions and how they have consequences and uh, yeah, it's just it can be a great outlet. Um, I love it. I love it. I think it's my favorite genre, honestly. Um, and I don't like it because of the gore factor. Like that's something that comes with it that creates that emotional, visceral response or reaction. But we all get things. We all experience things differently. You know, my experience will not be the same for somebody else uh, because I put whenever I view something like that, it's just a matter of like, oh, I can familiarize with this aspect of what's going on, or I want to get involved in these characters. You know, you just have to be in the right place at the right time. And a lot of people don't like horror because it just scares them, you know. But that's just the surface area of this genre, you know. good good scary movies, they do that for you, but the greatest scary movies, they take you on that roller coaster ride of emotions. They have you experience the heartbreak, they have you experience the comedy, they have you experience the fear, and then they help you experience the notion to get over that fear through the courageous actions of the main characters. That's just that's just how I feel. But I think this series kind of it takes you a little, it takes you on that. However, there are elements that are not balanced as well as I thought they should be, and that's just my personal preference. I think overall, it's a pleasant series to watch. Oh, and some of the writing was done well enough to in my head create this weird uh, this strange thought that I began to think about the characters in a sense of um, in the way that the characters in the universe would think about them. So, for instance, the priest, he starts out as a very good, or no, well, he starts out as a bad, like just an obnoxious character. He's not bad, but he seems like his actions are questionable, and with today's you know stigmas on priesthood and people that do stuff in the church, like you begin as an audience member to just like, oh, I don't like that guy, but a part of me wanted to like the guy, wanted to like the character and the bad guy, and I mean the I wanted to like the priest, uh, and so I just kept that in mind. But then at a certain point, you see him doing some things and you're like, oh God, this guy's annoying. His character is written so that he's doing these terrible things. And I wanted to still believe that he was, decent. But at the same time, there was that part of me that was just like, this mother son of a gun, oh, let's do something about him. But it's funny enough that I would think that because at that time, at that same moment, the characters that are having the experience with him that he's doing bad things to, they're having that same notion. And by that, like you kind of fit yourself into this box where you're now associating and familiarizing with the characters, and then all of a sudden it turns its head on you, and then it flips the coin, and you realize that he's not he's not such a bad guy. In fact, you could pretty much argue that he's the hero of the entire story, and that's how I kind of see it too. Like it might even be his story that's being told rather than the girl's story, because when it comes down to it, she, at the very end of the series, uh, is not done, where his story is concluded. And that part of the arc is concluded. So, yeah. Let me go back to my notes here and talk about uh, episode 8. Episode 8. I have that written down here. There were a few things that I saw. It had so many great concepts, is what I wrote down. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I'm about to figure that out. Let's see. Let's see what I wrote. So many great concepts, but the execution falls flat. There were, and this is the last episode, I think. Episode 8 is the last episode of the series. I mean, yeah, well, currently, last episode of this part of the series, this season. I don't know if they'll continue or not. I hope they do. Please, please. I hope they do. But they showed way too much of the creature. There was some wonderful visual setups that they had. And then nowadays, movies and television, web series, they make the mistake of showing a fully lit creature. And most of the designs for those creatures nowadays are just sadly goofy looking and just, ah, man, I can't get over how goofy looking this thing was. It it disheartened me because there's nothing worse in a scary movie than building up this entity and then all of a sudden when it's revealed, it looks like it came out of Beetlejuice the movie. And that may have been scary for me as a kid, but I think that it's ridiculous now. It's just too fantastical and the nature of it so far-fetched that I feel I feel it's cringe. It's very almost cringe worthy. Um, Man, that's harsh because I know you know that these guys they worked really hard. You can definitely tell when a series just the people in it just care so much. Um, oh, so it's just my personal point of view. It's just my opinion, really. Maybe some of you guys liked it and are just found it so terrifying. But to me, it looked so comical. The near the end where they finally just display the character full in full lighting and they had a nice visual setup, but it just didn't look the creature didn't look good. Anyways, also, oh, in that same episode, there was some weird editing. Like, I don't know, did they just give up on the editing aspect of things at this point? Because there's a scene where the main character, is with the evil entity, and they're walking, and then they stop because something has interrupted the process of the evil creature baiting our heroine into following her. And there's when it concludes, when that scene concludes, the the main character vanishes from that point on the beach or near the ocean, near the sea. But the way she vanishes, now this is the most upsetting part because it's just a straight up cut, like she just blinks out of existence in that spot, which I guess could make sense, but it looks so lazy. It looks so lazy that it's the most unimaginative. It's something I could have done with my iPhone, and I could have shot that scene. As as a bigger production company, you expect the value and quality of these fantastical, imaginative things to be up to a certain standard, and you hold them to a certain standard because they have the tools and because they have the assets. I don't want to see something like that. And if you have to execute it that way, please find a way to do it right. I mean, that was so frustrating to me. Her little bat drops, and you see that she's just vanished. But I, man, it was just the laziest way of explaining things to the audience. Of like, oh well, now she's back, and uh, it's just straight up cut her out. They just didn't do anything exciting with it. Oh man, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm sure you could find a way to justify it. by all means, given the right context, anything's justifiable. But from just viewing it, from just viewing a viewer's audience standpoint, it was awkward. It was so awkward and very upsetting. So weird edits. And I don't think that was the only weird edited scene, uh, but it's the only one that I can remember because I decided to start writing things down at this point, or actually a little bit before that. And I didn't take notes on every episode, but just on a few. I guess the ones that were most prominent to me. Um, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm talking and I'm exploring shapes and I'm just playing with it. So this is part of my creative process. Whether or not I come up with something cool, we'll find out. I'm just gonna keep going. That looks so lame. Let's see. Squeeze it, squeeze it. Um, I do like some of the creature scenes that were executed. Oh man, and some of the things they came up with, wonderful, wonderful visuals. I just didn't like those bits. I just kind of dropped the ball and got lazy about it, I think. Um, but maybe it's important to the story, actually. Who knows? We'll find out later on. Maybe there's something they can do design-wise or story-wise that'll help, uh, you know, buffer that element that we experienced that was just kind of eh. Uh, so let's see what else. What else? Oh, that's 20 minutes. That's 20 minutes already? Oh my gosh. Let me go over this really quickly. Hmm. Oh yeah, you know how I was talking about the priest and how he was like I wanted to like him, but then he seemed like a butthole, and I wanted him to, you know, I wanted something to happen to him. I didn't want him to die. I just wanted retribution because I thought he was doing bad things. But then it turned out he wasn't doing bad things, and so he was actually a good guy, and then I felt bad. And so the story takes you on a roller coaster of developing the characters in that way, and you kind of take a seat from the you take this back seat, but you experience those characters through each person's eyes. So like if I was the main character, then I would see the priest as, being kind of dirty and filthy, but then all of a sudden he becomes, better, and then uh, and even though we don't take the opinions of, or we don't readily become the main character and see her opinion, or I don't see the way she sees him. Uh, the story took you on that path, so you get to experience the characters in different ways. And another example was her love interest. And at the very end, I had totally written this down. I wrote down a quote that she says. She says, "Time to see a real nice guy." And then she says this right after she talks about the priest because they go to visit him, and she gives him some flowers, and uh, she turns to her friend and she's like, "Well, I don't know if he definitely wasn't a bad guy, but I don't know that he was a good guy. But I don't know that you're supposed to be a good guy with his job or a nice guy." She said, she doesn't say good guy. She says he wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't a nice guy. And then she says, "Let's go see a real nice guy." And as soon as she said that, I wrote that down because I was so frustrated because there was a scene where, and this is a big spoiler. There was a scene where she had let him into her room, and he's married, and they have sex together. And I was like, does that constitute as him being a nice guy because he purposefully cheats on his wife in that scene? And I was like, that is not the definition of a nice guy. No, that's not right. So I'm going through this ebb and flow of the character. I like him, I don't like him. And then all of a sudden, she goes and at the very last scene, I hadn't, I wrote down, oh no, I hadn't finished watching this episode, and apparently it possibly wasn't him that had slept with her. It's very, like 90% sure that it's the entity that seduced her, and now, because of what she wrote and some of the things come true, she may have this weird offspring demon child thing. So, typical trope, right? But it was the way they did it in terms of having that character, a likable character, and then having him a bit disgusting as a pig, and then turning it around and being like, well, you know what, guys? It's probably not his child, most likely not his child, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's so good, it's so good, it's nice, I like it, I like that. Um, so I wrote down either way the story is interesting and develops the characters well enough to resolve the current storyline, but not enough to end their growth in the story. So therefore, you get nice resolution to the entire first season. However, there's still the possibility of them growing as characters, unless you're the priest. Okay. All right, guys. We'll probably continue along with this next time. Until then, take care. Be well.